Ford built a car so expensive, so exclusive, that they lost money every single time someone bought one, on purpose. It cost more than a Rolls-Royce. Elvis owned one, Sinatra owned one, Eisenhower gave one away as a gift, and after 2 years, right when it was working, Ford killed it. Only 2,994 were ever built. This is the strangest success story in American car history, and almost nobody remembers it. This is why America forgot the 1956 Lincoln Continental Mark II. Before we get into how this car came to exist, here's what actually made it remarkable, ranked from impressive to almost unbelievable. Number 3, the construction. Every single Mark II was hand-assembled in a dedicated facility separate from Ford's normal lines. Panel gaps were measured and adjusted individually, car by car, something no other American manufacturer was doing at any real volume in the 1950s. Every owner even received a fitted leather binder documenting that specific car, plus a set of Hartman luggage built to the exact dimensions of that car's trunk. Number 2, the owners. Elvis Presley, Frank Sinatra, Dwight Eisenhower reportedly gave one away as a gift. This wasn't a car that needed advertising. It was a car that showed up in the right driveways on its own. And number 1, the reason this whole video exists, Ford lost roughly $1,000 on every single unit they sold, priced above a Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud, on purpose, and then stopped building the car the moment that loss had done its job. Only 2,994 were made. That's the detail nothing else on this list can top, and it's exactly why we're here. Now let's go back to where this whole thing started, because none of this happened by accident. To understand why Ford built a car designed to lose money, you have to go back to the early 1950s, and you have to understand what Cadillac had become. By 1953, Cadillac wasn't just a car company, it was the symbol. If you'd made it in America, if you owned a business, if you'd bought your way into the country club, if you wanted the neighbors to know you'd arrived, you bought a Cadillac. It was shorthand. Everyone understood it instantly. And Ford, despite building some of the best-selling cars in the country, had nothing that competed at that level. Lincoln existed, but Lincoln wasn't Cadillac, not even close. This bothered Henry Ford II, not in a small way. He didn't just want a car that could outsell Cadillac. That fight was already lost, and everyone in Dearborn knew it. What he wanted was something different. A car that Cadillac owners would look at and feel a flicker of doubt. A car so far above the ordinary luxury tier that Cadillac itself would start to look common by comparison. Not a volume play, a prestige play. And prestige, it turns out, is one of the most expensive things you can manufacture because you can't fake it. People can tell. So Ford created a separate division just for this, the Continental Division, entirely apart from Lincoln, reporting straight to Ford leadership. That alone tells you how seriously they took this. They weren't building a nicer Lincoln. They were building something that had to justify existing as its own category. And the man they put in charge, William Clay Ford, Henry Ford II's younger brother, had a very specific vision for what that meant. It didn't mean more chrome. It didn't mean bigger fins. It meant restraint. While the rest of Detroit in the mid-1950s was piling on ornamentation, more bright work, taller tail fins, gaudier grills every single year, the Continental Mark II went the other direction entirely. Clean lines, a flat, uncluttered hood, no tail fins at all at a time when tail fins were basically mandatory. The design language was almost European in its discipline, closer to what you'd see from a coach builder in Turin than anything coming out of a Detroit design studio in 1956. And that restraint was deliberate, because the entire philosophy behind this car was that true luxury doesn't need to shout. It was aimed at people who already had money. Old money in a lot of cases, who didn't need a car covered in ornamentation to prove anything to anybody. Park a 56 Cadillac next to a 56 Continental Mark II, and the Cadillac looks like it's trying. The Mark II doesn't look like it's trying at all. That's the whole point. But designing a restrained, elegant body was the easy part. The hard part, the expensive part, was how Ford chose to actually build these cars. Every single Mark II was hand-assembled, not hand-finished, hand-assembled from the ground up in a dedicated facility separate from Ford's normal production lines. The panel banks were hand-fitted to tolerances that were unheard of on an American production car at the time. Panel gaps measured and adjusted individually, car by car, something no other American manufacturer was doing at any real volume in the 1950s. Every owner even received a fitted leather binder, a literal owner's portfolio, documenting that specific car. Inside was a build sheet unique to that vehicle, service information, and even a card confirming your car's paint had been color matched so precisely that if you ever needed a touch-up anywhere in the country, a dealer could mix it exact. Owners also received the fitted set of Hartman luggage, designed specifically to fit the trunk of that car and nothing else. Matched leather, matched stitching, built to the exact dimensions of that trunk space. This wasn't a glove box manual. This was a physical object that told you explicitly that the company building your car understood you were paying for something individual, not something off a line. Now, all of that costs money, an enormous amount of money relative to what a normal car cost to build in 1956. And this is where the actual strategy comes into focus, because Ford's leadership knew going in exactly what this level of construction would cost per unit. They ran the numbers, and the numbers said that even at a price point of $9,695, which in 1956 was an almost unthinkable sum for an American car, Ford was still going to lose roughly $1,000 on every single Mark II they sold. For context on just how extraordinary that price point was, $9,695 put the Continental Mark II directly against the Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud, which sold for around $9,400 that same year. Think about that. An American manufacturer built a car and priced it above a Rolls-Royce on purpose and still lost money doing it. A base Cadillac in 1956 cost a fraction of that. Ford wasn't competing with Cadillac's price. They were competing with Cadillac's ceiling and then building something that sat above the ceiling entirely. And Ford's leadership approved that loss, knowingly, because the Continental Mark II was never designed to be a profit center on its own. It was a statement deployed for a specific purpose, and once that statement had landed, once Lincoln's image had genuinely shifted in the American luxury market, the financial logic of continuing to lose $1,000 on every single car simply stopped making sense. Ford had proven what it needed to prove. The Continental name would go on, eventually rejoining the Lincoln lineup in a more conventional, profitable form. But the specific vision behind the Mark II, the hand-built, money-losing, restraint-over-excess halo car, that had done its job, and Ford closed the book on it deliberately, the same way they'd opened it deliberately. Between 1956 and 1957, only 2,994 Continental Mark IIs were made. That's it. That's the entire production run of a car that briefly stood as one of the most important American automobiles of its era, not because of how many were sold, but because of what its existence proved. And here's the part that tends to surprise people most. Despite everything this car represented, despite the owners, despite the engineering, despite genuinely reshaping how a major American brand was perceived, the Continental Mark II slipped out of the public memory almost as completely as it slipped out of production. Ask most people under 60 what the Lincoln Continental Mark II is, and you'll get a blank look. It doesn't have the instant recognition of a '57 Chevy or a Cadillac Eldorado. It was never mass-produced enough to stay lodged into collective memory the way high-volume icons do. It made its mark quietly, the way it was designed to, and then it receded just as quietly. But the collector world never forgot. Today, a well-preserved Continental Mark II typically brings somewhere between $85,000 and $175,000 according to Hagerty's valuation data. And clean, well-documented examples, especially ones that still have that original fitted luggage or the owner's portfolio, command real premiums at auction. Serious collectors understand exactly what they're looking at. One of the only American cars ever built where the manufacturer knowingly lost money on purpose to build something that had no business existing in a normal profit and loss sheet, and succeeded so completely that it made itself unnecessary in just 2 years. That's not a failure. That's about as clean a mission accomplished as Detroit ever produced. It just happened quietly enough that most of the country never noticed, which, if you think about the kind of buyer this car was built for in the first place, is probably exactly how they wanted it. If this is the kind of automotive history you don't get anywhere else, the stories behind the cars, not just the spec sheets, subscribe because there's a lot more where this came from. And if you've ever seen a Continental Mark II in person, or if your family had one, drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and honestly, those stories are half the reason I keep making these videos.